Hello monsters! It's awesome to see that you guys made it here safely after that long spaceship ride from wherever you guys come from. So after digging up some dead folks at the old cemetery down the road, just to make sure that none of them had turned into zombies yet, I stumbled across someone who was, well, digging up these bodies I guess to check for the same thing, I think. So you may be wondering, what do we have in store for you tonight, monsters? Well...
Hey everyone, Dark Voices here. Tonight we bring you 10 Let's Not Meet stories from Reddit. So hold on to your teddies and let the stories begin. Crazy Eyed Guy by Liam. So this happened a week ago at around the same time, around 2 a.m. Just a bit of background, I live in the UK. I live in a fairly typical student house, in a bad area full of damp, etc. Anyway, it's the Easter holidays here and we got 2 weeks off. So there's 7 of us in the house usually, but everyone has gone home. I don't have a lot of family and I have ridiculous amounts of work to do. So I decided to stay here for Easter. Now I don't care when I say this, but I hate being alone. Every little noise at night still freaks me out and I'm 22 years old. Anyway, yesterday I set up camp in the living room, doing some work with headphones in. There's a door from the living room that leads to the backyard. Really small yard with another door leading to a small alley. I go out for a smoke down the alley, which is creepy as hell. I get back, but do you ever have that something's wrong here moment? I did. I was thinking how paranoid I was. I walk into the kitchen, I got a drink, and I definitely heard a noise. I got a knife out the drawer. There was a shadow near the empty space where the old washing machine was. I nearly pissed myself. Don't know what to do. I don't know why I did, but I threw some kitchen towel at him. He screamed, and he banged his head on the wood. I was standing there with a knife, and the guy looked at me dead in the eyes. He had some crazy contact lenses, like blood red ones. Just made the situation worse. I just got out and I called the police. He ran out through the door, into the alley. I rang the police, told them about it, completely forgot about the washing machine space. I showed the police where he came in. There was a bag with 3 knives, lighter fluid, and matches. I honestly didn't know what to do. Safe to say, crazy-eyed guy, let's not meet.
Stranger kept on coming to my house. By soapysudz. Okay, so all this happened in mid-2014 when I was 15. On Sunday mornings, I had the house to myself, so like any teenager, I relished being home alone. I would always sit in my living room, drinking a cup of coffee and watching TV. In the living room, there are 2 windows that face the street I live on. You can kinda see into my living room if you try hard enough because the curtains covering the windows are white and kind of thin. So, one Sunday morning, I'm in the midst of my Sunday morning routine, when all of a sudden I hear this loud, persistent banging on my front door. I was pretty confused on to why whoever was at the door wouldn't use the doorbell, seeing that it was right there. I did not answer the door because I was always taught never to do so if I was home alone. I also had a really bad gut feeling, so I muted the TV and got away from the living room window and pretended like I wasn't there. I could not check to see who it was without giving away that I was home alone because of the layout of the house. Our living room is right next to the foyer of the house, but the front door, see-through, is glass, so whoever was there would see me. Whoever was banging on the door kept on doing so for a solid 5 minutes, and then stopped. They walked away from my house and down my street. I was able to finally get a glimpse of what they looked like. It was this short, stocky guy, wearing a white wife beater and saggy pants. I had never seen him before, which was unusual because usually I only saw people who lived in the neighborhood walking around. He looked a bit off. I can't really explain it, but my gut feeling was that something was wrong with this guy. Since I saw that guy walking off towards my neighbor's house, I figured that maybe he was just trying to sell me something. But instead of approaching my neighbor's front door, the guy passed it. He then passed all the neighbors' houses that I could see and continued walking on the road, not going up to any other house. I sighed, a breath of relief, thinking that maybe it was all just some huge misunderstanding, and then I relaxed and went back to my Sunday morning routine. About 20 minutes later, I hear the guy banging on the door again. This time, I was paralyzed by fear and decided to just hide in the corner and hope that he would leave. Like the first time, he persistently banged on the front door for about 5 minutes before leaving. I looked out the window and it was the same guy. I was pretty freaked out, and my reoccurring visitor had caused me to cut my morning routine short and retreat back to my bedroom. I was pretty scared and expecting the guy to come back again, so I had 911 on speed dial just in case things took a turn for the worse. Like I had previously anticipated, the guy came back after another 20 minutes or so, banging on the door, which now had pushed me to the breaking point. At this time, I was freaked. I called my mother and I told her about the situation, and she came home immediately. The guy stopped coming back to my house and I promptly felt better about the situation and thought that maybe, just maybe, I had overreacted. But I was still on edge nevertheless. The following Sunday, the guy came back. But I wasn't home alone this time. My mom and I were the only ones there, and neither one of us were fond of the idea of answering the door. There was just something that told us not to open that door, so we just ignored the guy. This persisted for a month or two. Every Sunday from about 9 to 11, the guy would come around banging on my door. Then, it had stopped, and I never saw the guy again. I have no idea who this guy was or what he wanted, and I don't really know if I wanted to know. All I know was that my gut was telling me not to open that door. To this day, even hearing someone ring the doorbell or bang on the door causes me to feel a wave of paranoia and act cautiously.
Chat Room Guy by Mayun 1984. Okay, so I am on my phone. Please forgive my mistakes of structuring this. Okay, so when I was 17, I was always in Yahoo chat rooms. I was always chatting with people in the local Seattle rooms. Well, this one guy and I chatted a lot and decided to meet. We met at Herfy's for lunch. When he showed up, it was very obvious the guy lied about everything. His age, what he looked like. The guy even admitted he lied about having a job. He showed up to Herfy's on the bus. After we ate, I said, "This was nice, I have to go." And as I walk away, the guy starts following me. I walked to the burger joint because I didn't live very far, and I didn't want this guy to follow me home. My mom was a flight attendant and was out of town. My mom had about a week left until her days off from flying, so I really did not want this weirdo knowing where I live. I started telling this guy I had some appointments to take care of. I was trying to shake him off from following me, but he insisted that it was okay. Not knowing what else to do, I stopped at the bus stop and waited for the bus to downtown Seattle. He stopped too and got on the freaking bus with me. The whole ride, he kept trying to talk to me, but asking me all sorts of questions and filling with lies because I didn't want him to know things about me. At one point, he tried putting his arm around me and I leaned away. So he tried putting his hand on my thigh, and I told him I don't know him well enough for him to touch me. I felt sick to my stomach throughout the whole bus ride, trying to rack my brain with with what the hell to do once I go to downtown. I walked over to the building where my best friend's mom worked. Since I knew the layout of the building, I could play it off. I asked a woman at the cafe there if I could use the restroom. She agreed. Okay, let me explain this. There is a delivery service door outside and it leads to this hallway. And this hallway has doors that lead to all the different shops and to a service elevator to take things and merchandise to the other stores on the upper levels. So I exited the cafe through the back door and into the hallway and left the building out the door next to the docking bay. I took this as my chance to make my way to the bus stop to go home. I was going to take the express bus and just get off at the airport instead of the other bus that takes forever. Well, as I make my way to the bus stop, I see the guy in the cafe still waiting for me. I managed to make it on the bus and never saw the guy again. However, a few nights later, I was on Yahoo Chat again when someone messaged me and I told him I wanted to see a picture to know who I was talking to. I see the picture and instead pick up the phone and call one of my friends. The friend I call, his mom and aunt were really good friends with my mom and aunt. And our grandmothers had been close friends too, back in Eastern Washington before either of us were born. So he answers and I start talking to him. Hey, are you on Yahoo Chat right now? No, why? Someone is trying to talk to me and they gave me a picture of you, claiming it was them. Well, I go back to talking to the guy online and he admits it's not a picture of him. He admits who he is and said he felt we had a great connection but lost me. He started to confess his love to me and everything. I cussed the guy out, told him I lost him on purpose. Then I changed my Yahoo name and never met anyone from Yahoo Chat in person ever again. Creepy internet clingy guy, let's never meet again.
Crocodile by Nanny Nighttime. My parents, bless them, had nothing but the best of intentions when they tried to shelter my sister and I as much as they could. They educated us to the point where we knew what the world was like when they thought it was appropriate, but I had to acquire street information for myself. This made itself apparent when I went out overnight to the university I would eventually attend. Sitting in my host's dorm room, one of her hallmates passed by and mentioned he had special cookies. They all were excited, so I threw them off when I legitimately asked if his mom made him cookies or something. Flash forward to last year. The first semester of junior year is spent abroad in my university's London site. My drug knowledge has gone up a bit, but as the one vice I have is Jack Daniels. I still don't know much. My best friend Sammy was among the students who went, so many of our 3-day weekends were devoted to travel. Airfare was cheap, so why not? This particular weekend brought us to Kyiv. We arrived and promptly made friends with a group of girls at our hostel from Maripol who thankfully spoke English. They invited us to a nightclub, and we accepted. I was in a particularly good mood for whatever reason, and found myself quickly indulged in the whole scene. After dancing with some of my new friends and Sammy, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. Hey, psst, little blonde girl. Even over the music, I heard it, and knew that it was directed at me. It was a man who looked like a bear. Huge, dark features, leer in his eye. I, of course, in my drunk state, was thrilled to make a new friend. He asked if I wanted to have a good time, and if I liked what he offered me, I could have an even better time with him and his friends. He produced what looked like a vial of murky red liquid. I took it, and then he pulled out a needle. That spooked me, but I was also intrigued. I watched him fill it up, tap it. I felt the little splatters go on my arm. A faint scent of iodine filled the air. And suddenly, my brain snapped back into reality. I need to go. I mumbled. He did not like this, and grabbed my wrist, turning it so my inner arm was facing outward. But my friends want to meet you, he said, waving the needle in front of me. I stepped on his foot, hard. He lost his grip, and I ran back to my friends. I had asked if we could leave, but I was too shaken up to tell them what exactly happened, and I really didn't want to spoil the evening. The next morning, we all met for breakfast. I had decided to tell them about my experience from last night. The girls from Maripol grew somber. Did you say red liquid? I nodded and then said, yeah, it smelled like the doctor's. With a horrified look, one of the girls said, that's crocodile. Okay, don't touch that stuff. It really messes you up. A girl like you, who's never taken drugs? Yeah, that stuff is not like ketamine, but I think that guy might have wanted to try to hurt you. You said you washed your hands, right? Because that stuff, it'll rot your flesh. Come to find out, it was a drug called crocodile. I don't think I'll be going back to Kyiv.
The Guy Creeping on My Sister by Stoner Silence. A few weeks ago, my mom sent me and my little sister to the store a few blocks away. It was a nice day, so we walked. Once we got inside, my sister and I split up. She heads for the food area, and I go to the household items to grab cat food or something. While I'm over there, I hear someone talking to the cashier asking, "Where is she?" The cashier responds, "She's not here, so you might as well leave." I think nothing of it because I'm too engrossed in the cat food options before me to bother thinking of how threatening that sounded. I finally grabbed a bag and head to the other side of the store to find my sister. As I turn to look down the aisle, I see a guy standing at the other end staring down an aisle with his back to me. The store is small, and I know it well enough to know that he's staring down the snack aisle, which is where my sister always is. I speed up and look over his shoulder to see he is indeed staring at my little sister, and that my sister is close to freaking out. So I shove past the guy, hitting him with cat food by mistake, and call out to my sister asking if she's ready, because our dad was waiting in the car. The guy left quickly after that, and my sister told me he was following her through aisles as she roamed. So we ended up standing around in the store until we were sure he was gone, and then speed walked home. Considering it's a somewhat small town, my sister won't be walking anywhere alone for a while.
Strength in Numbers by Artemis8819. This happened when I was a freshman in college in Boston, about 10 years ago. The campus was urban and was in the middle of downtown. Not your traditional college campus, kind of a cluster of college buildings on the city street in front of a park. The area has definitely gotten a lot better since the schools expanded, but when I went there, it was a bit rough at night. A few junkies and homeless people would wander around, and there were periodic muggings in the park. My roommates and I were all up late doing homework. We were hungry and wanted junk food, but all of the stores in the college buildings were closed, and it was the weekday, so our beloved pizza place wasn't open late either. That left 7-Eleven. All of the students were warned by college staff not to go to this 7-Eleven at night, especially alone. It was located right in the buffer zone between a rougher neighborhood and the college. The 7-Eleven actually closed for a few hours at night to prevent robberies. Usually there would be a few sketchy characters out front just hanging out or trying to sell random stuff, that was clearly stolen, like cell phone chargers or other items that you would find in a car. Well, my 3 roommates and I, all being young college students, chose junk food over personal safety. We thought that no one would bother us if we all 4 went together. We bundled up and did the 2.5 block walk to 7-Eleven. Our dorm room was a straight shot down the street until you reached the other dorm. You turned, and then 7-Eleven was half a block away. I remember there being a big semi-truck with a trailer parked on the side of the road, and so we were obscured from anyone who was driving on this road. We had reached the store without incident. There were 4 sketchy-looking older men out front, but we ignored them and went in and bought our chips, raw cookie dough, and sodas. The 4 of us walked out, and all 4 of the sketchy guys abruptly turned, fanned out into a line, and started to follow us. I don't remember much about what they looked like, but they all wore ragged clothing, and I vividly remember them walking with that predatory swagger. We immediately realized what was happening, but we were all dumb 18-year-olds and we really didn't know what to do but keep moving. We got back to that part of the sidewalk that was blocked by the semi and started speed walking, knowing that no one would be able to see us if they tried something. Stupidly, we didn't run, as if that was going to spur them into attacking. Anytime we sped up, they sped up. We managed to keep distance between them until we passed the truck. We finally got to the corner, pivoted, and then ran into the first dorm, even though it wasn't the one that we lived in. As we caught our breath and shivered about our encounter, one of my roommates went to the front door and peered around the side. You guys, they're waiting for us. The 4 guys were 2 building lengths down the sidewalk, in a cluster, watching the dorm building. My roommates and I stayed in the building lobby for 30 minutes until the sketchballs finally crossed the street and wandered off into the park. I tried to convince my roommates to get a security guard to escort us back to the dorm, but my boy crazy roommate recruited a couple of guys to walk us back instead. I don't know what they were planning, but I never went back to that store at night, even when I thought we had strength in numbers.
I'm Watching You by Jack Urko. So basically around 10 years old, I was walking home from school. It was around midwinter and I live in Norway, so naturally it was already dark outside. I met my older brother's friend on the way home. He told me he was going home from our house. So we stopped and talked for a second. Then he left and I started to walk again. There was a parking garage right next to me, and there was a hill which I was walking up. I have a weird feeling, like if someone is watching me. So I turned around and I saw nothing. I thought to myself that it was just my own imagination, but then I just have to check again. So I turned my head to the right, and suddenly a snowball lands directly in front of me. It scared the crap out of me. And I look up and to see someone standing on the garage. Now I knew it was that guy who threw the snowball. But I look at him and he looks like a gang member of some sort. And he does a movement with his fingers. He points at his eyes and then at me, which means I'm watching you. My heart starts beating at an alarming rate. Adrenaline starts rushing through my veins, and I start to walk faster. I turn around, and the guy jumps down from the parking garage. He starts to slowly follow me. I start walking even faster. He speeds up. I start running. He is at the edge of running. So at this point, I'm scared as hell. The guy is running after me. I have adrenaline pumping, and I'm thinking, what do I do? I was not very far from my house at this point, so I thought, if I run to my house and lock the door, everything will be fine. But then, suddenly, the guy stops. Now I'm really scared. So the fact that he stops does not bother me one bit. I keep running for my life. I cross the street and everything is fine. With me. I think to myself, okay, I'm just gonna get the heck out of here. So I stop running and I instead start walking faster than normal. I can see my house. I think to myself, now let me just get in my house because I'm scared as hell. But then I hear a scream, like if someone was being kidnapped. I turn, I see the gang member and his gang kidnapping another child. So I started to question what to do. Should I A, run in my house, lock the door, grab the phone and call the cops? Or B, scream at the gang, hopefully distracting them so the child could run, but take the risk of them going for me instead. Luckily, I didn't have to take a choice. 2 police cars pull up and chase off the gang. To this day, I don't know if the police cars were just in the area, and if they heard the scream, if they passed the scene and saw it, or if someone called them. But I've learned to never walk alone when it's dark.
Creep at the Library by Creepy Dad, I Love You. And this happened about 6 years ago. I was 13 years old. One summer, my mother, her boyfriend, my younger sibling, and I stopped by a small public library. Now, this library was no bigger than the average classroom, and it was mostly empty besides a few other utilities and the computers and, of course, the librarians. I had just wandered just outside from my parents and into the young adult section when this short, overweight woman, and probably in her 40s, and came up to me and asked if I could help her. I thought she had mistaken me for a worker there, so I apologized, but she touched my arm to keep me from walking away. She continued to talk. Her voice was a bit gruff. I need your help. I'm a private investigator, and I'm currently following a target. I need to call him, but he'll recognize my voice. I was wondering if you could come out to my car and maybe make the phone call for me. It'll be quick, just a few minutes. As a 13-year-old girl, I was well aware and afraid of stranger danger, so I said something along the lines of, I can't, I'm sorry. At this point, the woman, she became very frustrated with me. She let out this sarcastic breath and said, no, it's not that you can't, it's that you won't. I was very uncomfortable, and my voice began to shake a bit as I said, yeah, I am sorry. My mom's boyfriend overheard me talking to someone and approached us from one of the other sections. This woman had walked off before I had even begun to explain to my mom's boyfriend what had happened. And not only had she walked away, but she had left the library entirely. I got brave and looked around, and she was nowhere to be found. My parents, they thought little of it, saying that she probably was just on drugs or something. But looking back on it, seems more like she was trying to kidnap me. We were in a wealthy area, definitely not known for drugs, and the woman, she didn't seem high at all. Well, at least it wasn't like any high I've ever seen. I still wish that I had said something to one of the librarians, or that my parents had taken it seriously. I could have possibly saved another girl from something awful.
You Need a Ride by Old Blue Jay. Living across from a busy convenience store can be both miserable and entertaining. Last winter, I was heading out of the store making my way home when I had to walk past a parked but running tan Dodge van. "You need a ride?" said the driver. I said no, and made the stupid mistake of saying I live just right there. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time, because I had my husband waiting for my return just on the porch and thought this guy was just generally concerned because it was freezing weather out. While my husband and I carried on with our night, I started to realize the guy was still over there in his van that was parked perfectly facing us while we sat on our porch. My husband made it clear to him that we knew we were being watched and that he was watching him, so the van eventually drove off. But he started to drive by more about 5 minutes later, breaking his neck to look at me. Every time we thought we saw the last of him, there he was again, so my husband went out to the sidewalk, giving the driver the what the hell arm stretch. And he finally went off, I think. We called it a night and went back inside, peeking out the blinds every now and again. Next day, I noticed the same colored van parked a few blocks away in view of our house, but I'm not sure if it was him, and I damned well wasn't going to walk to find out. I didn't see the guy again for what seemed like forever, but I'm a paranoid person, so I was constantly looking around and staring down every tan Dodge van that drove by the house. A few weeks go by and I'm walking the same route and I realize I was walking past a parked tan Dodge van that is running. I slowly make my way walking past the rolled down window when there he is smiling freakishly at me, and in the midst of the most eerie deja vu, he asks me, "You need a ride?" I live it and say to him harshly, "No!" and confused that he already asked me and that why he was doing this. He started chuckling a bit as I pick up the pace and try to scoot away quickly. As I'm jogging down across the street, I feel his presence on me, and he is pulling onto the street at me, nearly hitting me. He laughs while asking, "You need a ride?" I'm bursting through the door, nearly in tears at this point. My husband is concerned, and I tell him that freaky situation just happened. We agreed to call the police and report this man for harassing me. They told me that he didn't actually do anything that was considered harassment, and said all they can do was maybe pull him over and tell him to knock it off. I haven't seen this man and hope to never see him again.
A Winter Wonderland by TheScrumpster. My family owns a cabin in upstate New Hampshire, and it's literally my favorite place in the world. It's on a small, very secluded lake, shared by only a few other cabins. Now, most of my neighbors only visit during the spring and fall months, and even then it's pretty rare to run into any of them. We all pretty much leave each other to do our own thing, but we also try to look out for each other the best we can. We'll occasionally check in on each other's properties during the off-season visits, just to be sure there hasn't been any damages from storms or any break-ins, etc. We all try to be good neighbors, because the lake is a pretty popular fishing location in the area as a result of it being so secluded. It's not unusual to see people who don't live on the lake in a boat or hiking around with a fishing pole. In the winter, it becomes a popular place for ice fishing and snowmobiling. So again, it kind of reinforces why all of us who own property on the lake try to look out for one another, as there are people coming and going at all times of the year. There have been a few break-ins on the lake over the years, but honestly, in the 30+ years I've been going up to the cabin, there have only been a handful. Occasionally, someone's canoe or kayak will go missing, but that's pretty much the worst of it. Well, until this winter. My wife and I decided to take a week-long vacation at the cabin this winter, and she was getting ready to start a new job, and I had leftover PTO from the previous year, and so we figured we should take the opportunity to get away before our schedules started getting busy again in the spring. It was sort of a spare-of-the-moment thing, but once we got the idea of spending the week alone together, relaxing by the wood stove, drinking craft beer, winter hiking, and binge-watching DVDs, we couldn't get it out of our heads. 2 weeks later, we were packed up in my father's F-150 and we were on the road. Things got wacky immediately. But first, there are a couple of things you need to know about this location. Now, the lake basically sits in the middle of a dead zone as far as wireless reception goes. Sometimes you can randomly get a couple of bars of service, but never with regularity. The isolation and feeling of being unplugged is one main reason I love going up to the cabin. It becomes a lot easier to not glue yourself to your phone when you physically can't. Secondly, as mentioned before, this place is secluded. It is a solid 10-minute drive before cell phone receptions kick in with any sort of consistency, and about another 5 before you reach town. A couple of years ago, and after much debate within the family, we decided to break down and get a satellite dish installed so we would have some connection with the outside world. We essentially have basic cable for news, weather, and a phone line. However, my folks have the service suspended at the start of winter since our family rarely visits during those months. So, my wife and I were heading up without a phone connection, but it had never been a problem before, so we didn't really think anything of it. It hadn't snowed too much in our area, but the ground was still covered in a few inches of old snow, and there were snowmobile tracks all over the place. Before reaching the final turnoff towards the cabin, you have to drive over this causeway. That's a fancy term for a land bridge. And while crossing it, you really get a good view of both sides of the lake. It had been cold for a few weeks straight, so the lake was frozen over. I looked out over the lake and saw what appeared to be 2 guys ice fishing, sitting on a picnic table out in the middle of our side of the lake. It was my neighbor's picnic table. I knew right away that it was his because of his very distinct paint job. This exact thing had actually happened before, and the last group of fishermen that did this left his table out on the ice, and it fell through once the lake started to thaw. Because of this, my neighbor had chained his new picnic table to a concrete footing on the edge of his property. So, that means these guys either broke the table to get it out on the lake, or they broke the chain. I'm also pretty confident that that wasn't my neighbor out there on the ice, because, well, he lives in Florida, he doesn't fish, and never visits in the winter. This pissed me off. I say something along the lines of, "Again? What the hell is their problem?" to my wife, and she reciprocated in a similar fashion. Since both of us were in agreement, I sped up to get to the cabin and confront them before they could run off. Now, I didn't really have a plan, but I figured I would go yell at them and threaten to call the cops if they didn't put it back, which I couldn't actually do. I kind of figured that as soon as they saw the truck turn down the road, they would take off anyway. I was right, but oddly, more right than I knew. As we came down the road, I noticed a few things that struck me as odd. First, there were 2 dudes jumping onto and starting up snowmobiles that were parked in front of my neighbor's cabin. Second, the front door to the cabin was wide open. Lights were on, and there was smoke coming out of the chimney. I stopped the truck about 50 feet from his driveway and watched as the 2 guys drove the snowmobiles out onto the lake, and picked up their buddies, and sped off across the lake into the woods. We kind of just sat there for a minute or so, dumbfounded. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but it definitely didn't feel right. I guess it was technically possible that my neighbor was visiting, or that maybe he rented his cabin out to some people, but my gut told me that wasn't the case. There were no cars in his driveway, and the guys on the snowmobile were definitely in some sort of hurry when we pulled up. Also, it was like 10 degrees outside, so why would they leave the door open? After snapping out of it, I parked the truck in front of our cabin and walked over to the edge of the lake. Sounds traveled pretty well out there, and I could hear the snowmobiles getting farther and farther away. I unlocked our cabin and threw a quick start log into the wood stove, and then my wife and I headed over to my neighbor's cabin with our dog. I called out hello a few times and got nothing back. As we got closer, I could clearly see that the front door was splintered and had been pried open. My wife and I had unknowingly pulled up while people were actively breaking into my neighbor's cabin. Not exactly an ideal way to start a relaxing winter getaway. My family is on really good terms with our neighbor, so I went ahead and stepped inside to check it out. There was a fresh pile of wood by the stove, and the kitchen had some paper plates, food, empty beer cans, and cigarette butts strewn about. Nothing seemed broken or missing that I could tell, but the place was an absolute mess and reeked of cigarettes. It was as if they just had decided to help themselves and make my neighbor's cabin their own private fishing lodge for a while. There were some sleeping bags and a cooler in the living room, so it looked like they had been planning to stay for more than a day. I wasn't in the cabin for more than a minute or so, and I was careful to not touch anything. I did, however, snap a few pictures for my neighbor and the cops, and then I snuffed out the wood stove. I also decided to close the front door the best I could when I left, while wearing gloves, of course, since we were going to have to leave in order to get in touch with the police and my neighbor, and I didn't want the front door left wide open. We drove into town and reported the break-in to the police. After giving our report, we got in touch with our neighbor. He was, understandably, very upset. I did my best to assure him that things weren't too bad, all things considered, and that there would be just some cleaning up to do. I offered to do it since we were going to be up there all week, but he insisted that he wanted to see it all for himself. He was going to make plans to fly up from Florida to deal with everything as soon as he could, but asked if I could nail a couple of boards across the broken door for now. The police were heading out to check out the property soon. When we got back to the cabin, the police were already at my neighbors checking things out. One of them came over and asked if I would walk them through everything that happened. I retold the story, and ended it with something along the lines of, "So I left after shutting down the stove and closed the door behind me. I got some weird looks, and then the conversation went something like this. Now, are you sure you closed the door? Because it was open when we got here." "Yes, I definitely closed the door." "Well, it was open, and the items you described weren't there either. The sleeping bags, the cooler, they weren't there. So it looks like they came back and got them." That was pretty unnerving for some reason. Why risk coming all the way back for some sleeping bags and a cooler after getting away? They couldn't have known for certain that if we didn't or weren't able to call the police right away. So the cops suspected that they were watching us and came back right after we left, or that there was someone else in the area we didn't see. I listened to the snowmobiles driving off, and they got pretty far away. They kept going until I couldn't hear them anymore, and the woods on the other side of the lake is completely untouched wilderness for a few miles. Now, I know because I hunt turkey out there, so I personally think that there was someone else close by watching us. My wife really liked that bit of information, especially since only a few years ago we had basically been followed by creepers on a previous trip to our cabin. The whole situation was just a giant downer. After a while, the cops finished up and let us know that they would keep a cruiser in the area, and that they were going to check out the other cabins for any signs of break-ins. I nailed my neighbor's door shut and dragged the picnic table off the ice. They had cut the chain and headed back inside for a much needed beer, or 3, or 4. We had debated a little bit about canceling the trip and heading back home for a staycation, but honestly we were determined to enjoy our week because we had really been looking forward to it, so we decided to stay. The next couple of days were great. We did exactly what we had planned on doing, which was mostly nothing. We watched movies, snuggled, and drank in excess. I had made my world famous chili and my wife ate it. We had bacon, eggs for breakfast, beer, grilled cheese, and mediocre Redbox movies for lunch, and vodka tonics, hearty winter meals, and sexy time for dinner. It was awesome. Granted, every time we heard a snowmobile, we both gave each other that "oh shit" look. But after a few times we were joking about it, and our "oh shit" looks morphed into a game, who can make the funniest face. We were just generally trying to have a good time. As much as we were enjoying being completely overindulged bed bunnies, by midweek we wanted to stretch our legs, so we decided to go for a hike. It was a beautiful day, and I knew the surrounding area very well, so I suggested we hike up to the dam at the mouth of the river, stream really, that feeds the lake. It freezes over in the winter and looks pretty cool. It was about a 2 or 3 hour hike round trip depending on the place, short and sweet. We brought our dog along, and again, we were having a great time, enjoying the extremely scenic winter woods and each other's company. On our way back, things took an unfortunate turn. About 2-ish miles, 30 minutes from the cabin, we hear the whine of snowmobiles. We each made a funny face and joked, and then got quiet and kept listening. They were getting closer. At the time, it wasn't exactly unexpected. It was a gorgeous day out, and we were smack dab in the middle of a prime snowmobile territory. But given everything that had happened earlier in the week, it was impossible not to feel a little uneasy. The snowmobiles kept getting closer, and the whine was getting louder and louder. My wife and I talked about something, but honestly, I wasn't really listening to her. I was going over the situation in my head, and I don't quite remember what we were talking about. The engines were getting louder, and it was obvious that they were coming down the same trail we were on. I suppose it could have been anyone. Perhaps a father and son enjoying the day, or a couple of friends off to meet up with some other buddies. Regardless, I just got a very bad feeling. I do carry a handgun, so I made the decision to unholster, rack around into the chamber, and then reholster, just in case. Not here to debate the pros and cons of guns or carrying, but I do what I do, and did what I did, and I feel good about it. The trail we were on was about 5-6 feet wide, and so once the snowmobiles came into view, I picked up our dog. He's a little guy, but thanks to the planet Earth is his, and the rest of us are just these weird, tall visitors here to grace him with treats. And then we stood off to the edge of the trail so they could pass us. I think we played it pretty standard as far as general common courtesy goes. As soon as they saw us, they both stopped in the middle of the trail, about 100 feet from where we were standing. I waved. They didn't wave back. I could see that they were both talking back and forth, and kept looking back at us. They seemed to be finished with their conversation, and then gunned their engines. Both of them started approaching us very fast, and appeared to be on the line to hit us. My wife and I stepped back a few steps into the brush. As they passed by at full throttle, I'm not talking inches, not feet. They continued past us for a bit, and then stopped, and turned and looked back at us. I instinctively, almost as a reflex, threw up my free arm, holding a furiously barking Boston Terrier in the other, and yelled,
"Yo, what the fuck is your problem?"
One of them replied with a middle finger, revved the engine a few times, and then both took off down the trail. My wife was a wreck afterwards. I too was scared, but she was really scared. The trail we were on basically ends where our property begins. So if it was the same people from earlier in the week, they would know we weren't home. We had another 30 minutes of hiking before we got back, and the whole time we could hear the snowmobiles ahead of us. They didn't disappear and get further away like before. The whole walk back, they were completely within earshot. After about 10 minutes, we could hear that they had stopped. The engines were running, but not at full throttle. After a few minutes, my wife and I had stopped and waited. They started at full blast again. This time though, getting farther and farther away. We waited until we could not hear them again, and then we headed for the cabin. When we got back, there were snowmobile tracks all around the property, out front and out back. They had been circling the cabin. We had no way to call the police, so after an extremely short and an extremely tense conversation, we promptly packed up, closed up the cabin, and left for home. Vacation officially ruined. We contacted the police, but there wasn't much to say other than a couple of assholes on snowmobiles almost ran us over and then drove all over our property. Now, we may have been more selective with our words. The police were certainly sympathetic, and again, given the break-in at my neighbor's, they seemed pretty concerned about it. In the end, there wasn't much for them to do. We gave descriptions, our info, and then left. Now, the thing that gets me the most is that even though my wife acts like it didn't bother her too much, I know it did. I have been going to that cabin my entire life, and some of my best memories I have are up there at that lake. Now, I have a terrible and frightening experience at that cabin, where the person I love the most in this world was potentially at risk. I'd never ask her to go somewhere she doesn't feel safe, and honestly, I am not sure I feel safe about going up there either anymore. The good news is that both my neighbors and my family decided to have alarm systems installed, so at the very least, someone will be alerted to any future break-in attempts. However, it still doesn't help with the fact that when we were far away from help, we were essentially at mercy of others. However, it's still believed that the vast majority of people are good-natured, but I'm learning that all it takes is one person, or multiple in my case, to really ruin your day. Stay safe out there. Well, monsters, I guess it's time for us to go. Unfortunately, your spaceship has already left about 10 minutes ago, and those dead bodies that I dug up earlier, yeah, they're zombies, so we better get out of here. But before we have to run and barricade ourselves in that building right across the street, I would like to give one monster shout out to Dark Voices. And monsters, be sure to check out his channel. Just click on the link right here. And big shouts to all you monsters out there too. And I really hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to leave some comments below. And if we can get at least 2 likes on this video, I'll make sure each one of you monsters gets your own 3-headed beaver to snuggle with at night. And if you like, be sure to subscribe and become a monster today. I really appreciate all of you being a part of this community, and like always, till next time.